Welcome to the Center for Transformation Institute podcast, where we are uniting with therapists everywhere for personal and professional growth. Your journey starts here at the place therapists grow.
Welcome again, Alex.
Thank you.
Thank you for being a part of this. I'm excited to talk together today about learning to know your own heart, part of the 5 to Thrive.
Yes,
right? It's
very
really
excited.
about identity. You know, that's what it's really about. So when I think about identity, my goodness, I think about the idea that I had no idea who I was for so long, right? I remember being like maybe married 10, 12 years and looking at our wedding picture and going, who is that? Like, what? And I remember being a therapist, and when I was the first couple years trying to work with people on identity and going, I don't know who I am. I'm asking them to figure out who they are, and I don't even know really how to figure this out for myself, right? So this idea of learning to know your own heart, I think, is a pretty big concept.
Yeah.
You know?
Definitely. And there's so many things that sometimes we use to define ourselves, like our occupation, like who we impact, what our family says about us, like so many things that can sometimes like what we take pride in or use to identify ourselves, but really there's so much more to it in a way that's so much life-giving and peace-giving. So true.
I think we oftentimes hear people say, and I know I've said this in the past, like, well, this is just who I am. You're going to have to get used to it. This is who I am. Or you don't like who I am.
Right.
Talking about aspects of my character, you know, maybe even unhealthy aspects of my character, right? And I can say, oh, this is how I am, or this is how I do things, right? And that could be a very unhealthy approach, because I think we use it to justify our behavior,
right?
And not really look at ourselves or metabolize some feedback that other people are trying to give us when we're trying to, you know, have relationships. You know?
Yeah, and it can sometimes come from a place of like, I've tried so long to change this, and you feel defeated, so you're just like, well, I guess it's just who I am.
Right.
And then we start defending it because we're insecure that we can't do anything about it, or we haven't been able to so far.
And then we're building a wall around ourselves because the people around us are upset by that behavior. Exactly. So when we think about the 5th aspect of 5 to Thrive, we got to first think through the first 4. Right? So 5 to Thrive is this big picture conceptualization that Life Model puts out there, that these are the 5 things people need in order to actually do well in life, to thrive. And this information first presented itself in the book Living from the Heart Jesus Gave You, that was written by Wilder and the colleagues that he had at Shepherd's House, which was a counseling practice. Man, I think they first started in the 80s, from what I can remember, and then the 90s, they somewhere in there they started writing this information in Living from the Heart. The maturity concepts, you know, the recovery concepts, the belonging concepts were all presented first there, and then the first a study on the live brain came out. Alan Shore did some amazing work that really helped them pull it all together. And 5 to Thrive was first mentioned in there. Right? And so when you look at Living from the Heart Jesus Gave You, which by the way is now on Audible, which is awesome. I know they have an audio version, which is great. Yeah, so if you haven't looked at that one, it's a really good one for the listeners to think about. Because it's really the groundbreaking or the main conceptualizations of Life Model were first presented there. And so when we look back at that, and then we try to go big picture of what is Life Model and what does it have to offer, I feel like that's been a really hard thing for a lot of people to wrap their mind around. I know when I first started learning about Life Model, I was like, what in the world is this? I knew it was something amazing, but every book I read or, you know, teaching I listened to, I just learned more and more. And it took a lot of time, years, to really pull the concepts together and apply. And I'm still, it's like the gift that keeps giving constantly. There's so much to it.
Yeah, and I think every time you read a book, like, you might pick up a few things, but we all have our own capacity limits of how much we can retain. But then as we put little bits into practice and we see more, and it just comes more full picture, the Big more picture. We're able. Yeah.
Exactly. Mm-hmm. And so that's why at the CFT Institute, you know, as we're creating this content for therapists, which will at some point be a therapist credentialing program.
Yes.
We're hoping for it to be like a 7 or 8 module credentialing program for therapists to become a life model informed therapist. And we are NBCC approved at this point, so people are going to be able to get continuing education credits from the awesome. Curriculum. I know, it's so awesome. So as we are prepping for that, Kyle Furlick and I developed an infographic, and this infographic is going to be offer like a big picture conceptualization to our constituents so that they can see the big picture, and then we go ahead and hone in on these unique individual aspects.
Right.
And so that 5 to Thrive is definitely there on the infographic, and like the restoration piece of that. Like, what is God trying to do to restore us as humans?
Yes. Yeah.
So 5 to Thrive starts with a place to belong. Then we go to a place to receive and give.
Yes.
Then we go to a place to recover from the things that have happened, the malfunctions, the fall, right? Sin, the flesh, the devil, all the things. And then we go to the place of maturity. After we've recovered, we can mature.
Yeah.
So these happen in progression. And then as we have matured or are maturing, we then do the 5th aspect, which is learning to know our own hearts, right?
Yeah.
And in living from the heart, it's living from the heart Jesus gave you.
Right.
Dallas Willard coined that phrase. If you're living from your hurt, you can't live from your heart. The heart Jesus gave you. The heart that God intends for you to have in this world.
Right.
To be able to be His essence and His life in the world.
Which is always so much of what we're striving for, right? Is to be more and more like Jesus. And we can have that inner tug of like, this is who I want to be, but this is who I am being.
Right.
And so, being able to come to that place of being able to be who God made you to be, and the heart Jesus gave you is so amazing.
Right. I think it's such an amazing concept, because when you think about it, you know, we're born not blank slates. You know, we're born with generational heritage, and our brain has some hard wiring towards some pretty tough stuff.
Yes.
Based on what generations before us have been through in family, in society, and worldwide disasters, and anything that hasn't been repaired. What we're knowing from what we are now recognizing from the latest research is that the brain is holding those things. The nervous system is holding those things, and it's important for us as humans to be able to recover from even the things our ancestors have dealt with.
Yeah, that's so huge. And we've talked about this before too, of like the relational skills that we have, the brain skills. We get those, we inherit those, and the lack of those from our parents.
Yes.
So it's, that adds a whole other layer to worldwide trauma and all that stuff too.
So there's the nature and nurture part of it, right? So we not only have what we've inherited, but now we have what we're nurtured in.
Right.
So even if you were adopted into a family, you're being nurtured in a certain direction. And that can be reparative, or it can be damaging. And because our parents aren't perfect, no one's is.
Yes.
Then we are inheriting some things, or we're being nurtured in some things that create gaps in our maturity.
Yes.
And then as a result, we get an inaccurate reflection back.
Right.
In terms of who we are. So a huge life model concept is this idea of we cannot see ourselves except through the lens of how others see us. That's neurology.
Right.
Because of mirror neurons. Right? So it's so weird to me that you're looking at me right now and I can't see myself, but I'm me.
Right, yeah.
That is so, like, my mind is always thinking about that. Like, you can't see you.
I know.
I can see you, but you're you, you know? And so it's like, you can't know your value unless I reflect it to you.
Right.
So if I'm having a bad day and I snap at you, right? And you may go, oh, there's something wrong with me. I'm annoying, right? I'm difficult. I'm something, or I'm a nuisance. But if I'm able to be in my true identity and reflect back the true value of who you are and who God created you to be, then you get this accurate reflection back.
Right.
About who you are. That you are a person who's loved and worthy of value and belonging.
Yeah. And that's amazing. So many times you can see so many people who are so insecure or have so much low self-worth.
Yes.
And it's because they don't have the people around them accurately reflecting that. And if those people are not mature themselves, it's more of a reflection of like what they're going through than that person. Yes. But they're not able to distinguish that, and then it negatively impacts those people. And
so true.
Yeah.
So true. And that's how we can see 5 to Thrive and how it like all goes together, right? Because you need the place to belong, where you feel safe, secure, like a home base type place, right? And the place that you're actually starting to receive, so then you can give. And then in that place also you are a place to belong, a place to receive and give life, a place to recover. You're recovering from the things that went wrong. So all your nervous system is like healing from the ways, the traumas and the things that have affected your life. Yeah. Right? Because you are now secure. And then you can grow in your maturity, and then you grow in your identity. Yeah. Right? So it comes together. Right? Here in the identity portion, because I can live from my true identity if I have that place to belong. Right? Right. I realized in my own life at some point, like when I first started getting to know Life Model, that I'm getting some inaccurate reflection back about who I really am based on how I was acting. Now, I was really acting in those ways in my intimate relationships. But what was happening is when I acted that way, I was getting such negative responses from my loved ones that I felt badly about myself, like I'm bad. So they couldn't tolerate my imperfections and still stay relational with me. Right. So it was launching me into this shame cycle. And I realized after I started looking at Life Model and recognizing the concept that, oh my goodness, I don't have people to give me this accurate reflection, not based on my behavior, but based on my value.
And who God created you to be.
Right. So it was really beautiful because it was at that time that I had a couple of my therapist friends want to get together more regularly to kind of grow together as therapists. And I said, can we try this identity group thing? Yeah. I've been hearing about this. I think Rare Leadership had just come out, and they said, sure, let's try it. And now this many years later, and it's been like 8 years, I think, 7, 8, something like that. We're still meeting. In fact, we met this morning, and we just sat, like we got in the room together, and we thought, oh, this is so nice. Yeah. We just feel so, it's rest. It's a home base. We call ourselves the Fab Five.
I love that so much.
Kind of a joke. but it's fun. There's 5 of us, and we just have been practicing these skills together this long that even when one of us is going through a hard time, might not be acting like ourselves, we can remind each other who we really are.
Yeah. And how is that, like, for our listeners, how has that group helped you to identify when you're acting to your true identity and when you're not?
That's a really good question. I think the fact is that a group like this is not an accountability group, because accountability, what Wilders say, is that's fear-based, where identity is love-based. It's attachment-based, right? So so what would happen is when we do these things called identity words, and you have been a part of that in the groups that you've been able to observe. And as we're giving those identity reflection back, what happens is we integrate them into our sense of self. What I started to notice years ago, and I still do, but acutely when I was first with the group, was that when I would start to kind of spiral into my way of emoting or responding to my emotions, I would say to myself, who do they say that I am? Who? And we know that Christ says these things. Right. He created us for relationship with each other. So this gives us a conceptualization of how to be Jesus for each other and reflect back the accurate, seeing each other through the eyes of heaven is how Wilder would say it. Okay. And so when I took those phrases, those words, those attributes that my people, my therapist identity group had given to me,
the place where you belong,
the place where I belong, when they had given me those, and I started to reflect back their faces and the words they'd said to me, it helped me get back to my prefrontal cortex, my sense of truly who I am, rather than living from the back of my brain. How do I get what I want? How do I survive? How do I fight, flight, freeze? It's more like, how do I act like myself? Because I went to the cingulate with my connection with my people.
Yeah.
In that moment, I can, the memory of them, the memory of what they've said to me, the memory of our times together helped me get connected to myself again and come at the situation more from my true identity. Who am I? What does it mean to be me? What does it mean to be my people? Who do my people think I am? And then it helps me to kind of organize myself and my identity because of that. So.
Yeah, it reminds me a lot of in the other half of church, and healthy shame versus toxic shame. It sounds like that identity group really gave you a foundation to give yourself healthy shame instead of that toxic shame attached to your identity. I'm bad, I'm this, I'm this.
Yes, exactly. Exactly. So I could talk all day, every day about this and how freeing it's been for me. And I know it's the same for you.
Yeah. And I think that's a piece of the identity reflection. That's something that I'm just now starting to get being here, which has been so amazing.
I love that.
So, just being able to be around people who can be tender to my weakness and value me because. But that hasn't been something that I've had before in my community. So I'm still in the beginning stages of that, but it's been really amazing. No, that's not who I am. This is, just starting out that.
Praise God. That's beautiful. Thank you for that feedback. And thank you for being a part of this today.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks for tuning in to this week's episode of The Place Therapists Grow. We hope you will join us next Monday. To expand your knowledge and continue your growth journey, go to cftinstitute.com and take our assessment. See you next time.